many fans have lost count. We've made it to UFC Vegas 88. And I was talking to you a little bit about this just before, but we're really close to UFC Vegas 100. And by the looks of it, we're probably going to hit it by the summer. So I was thinking, how funny would it be if, like, instead of like a UFC 300 watch party, we did a UFC Vegas 100 watch party? What are your thoughts on that?
We've been watching since the beginning, dude. You know, like the fact that it's already gotten to this point, like might as well, right? I feel like once they get to 100, like they're gonna try their best to, put the best card together. But after that, like I don't see much like plans going forward
UFC
for
Vegas
these things.
100 or UFC Vegas 100 needs to be Conor McGregor versus Dennis Seaver too.
At this point, put Connor on the UFC Vegas 100 card. Make Connor fight in the Apex.
Yeah, we weren't originally going to talk about this, but I feel like this is actually worth bringing up. What do you think about all this stuff with the UFC seemingly icing Conor McGregor right now towards the tail end of his contract? You been hearing about this or no?
Icing, so in the
Like putting
sense
him on the
that,
shelf, like they're not giving
yeah.
him a fight even though he wants one. Because it seems like he's very public about that he wants to fight in June. He's planning on going into camp for it, but the UFC is just kind of,
So they want his contract to.
basically never end. So that way he can't just
Okay,
like
I get it. Yeah,
kind of like what,
yeah,
remember when Nate Diaz was
yeah.
talking about that towards like the end of his contract with the company. It seems like Conor McGregor might be in a similar position, and I don't know. I mean, you never really know who to believe when it comes to Conor McGregor and the UFC talking, a
Wait,
little bit against one another. But
so were we talking like one more fight, two more fights? Like,
I don't. I'm pretty sure he only has one or two more fights. I'm gonna see like if I can find anything on it because I know it's been like talked about, but I don't. Yeah,
mm,
it says he had. No, never mind. That's like older. It's weird. Like it just having. Yeah, no. He said it's two. He has two fights left on his contract. So now we know two
mm.
fights, and yeah, it just seems weird
Well,
because he's
yeah.
the biggest star in the sport
None
and he's
of
not getting a
and
fight.
neither of those fights are going to be for a title. So
And then that kind of works in his favor because then his contract will just end. And I think the UFC knows that if his contract ends, I think he's going to go box and he's not going to come. Why would he come back? Like, especially if he seems to be having all these problems with the UFC. It just, I don't know. It seems odd. I just wanted to bring it up because I wasn't planning on bringing up Conor McGregor, but then like, when you get to talking about it and you really think about the fact that this fight with Michael Chandler has still not been booked, it's kind of crazy to think about. So let's hope for the sport's sake and for Conor's sake, I guess, that he does get a fight booked at some point, this year, hopefully before July. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that story. But it was worth bringing up. So let's get into UFC Vegas 88 though. So main event, heavyweight fight, Tuivasa, Marcin Tybura, two big dudes. And this fight, honestly, it kind of went about how it was expected to go. Tuivasa, he was attacking Tybura early, landed some big shots, and for Tybura, all it was about was, weathering the storm and then getting the takedown. And once he did get the takedown, it was pretty much a wrap. Tuivasa is known sometimes for having a weaker ground game, but in this fight, it just almost seemed to be non-existent. From the ground and pound from Tybura, and then immediately goes to that rear naked choke, puts Tuivasa to sleep, and that's Ty's fourth loss in a row now, which is kind of rough for him. But what did you think of this fight?
so I mean, like I saw that you saw early. It seemed like Ty, like had what he wanted, what he was supposed to do in order to win. Like he cut Tybura open early, and just yeah, like that's there's not much you can really do about being able to excel because the difference between Tai Tuivasa and Marcin Tybura is that Tybura is not great at one particular thing, but he's able to hold his own and whatever you need him to. Whereas Tai Tuivasa is just a really good striker, and yeah, like the grappling once again in this fight just withered away, unfortunately. And So yeah, it's just another 5 round heavyweight fight that obviously didn't need 5 rounds to it, but you know, it's at least this time around we got a quick finish, we got a decisive finish. No one gassing out or stuff like that. So I mean that's
At
yeah
the pace the fight was being fought at, I think if it would have lasted more than 1 or 2 rounds, I think they
yeah
both would have been out.
And I get it for a fight, two guys trying to vie for the top 10, but I like once again clearly one guy was gonna come away with a decisive victory. Obviously, unless something like just some crazy sort of stoppage happens, like some crazy eye poke, which ironically enough happened in the fight before this, or just obviously even like last week with the PFL and some for Cedric Doumbé's foot, some just crazy out of the blue stuff. So it's good. That's good that obviously we got a decisive win here. But on the other hand, for Tai Tuivasa's case, yeah, like that was one that obviously Marcin Tybura needed, but Tai Tuivasa also needed just as much. And it's one thing to lose a close decision, but to get finished again is another. And yeah, that definitely changes his outlook for who he's gonna fight next.
Yeah, you hate to see it for Ty. I mean, you talked about the 4 straight losses. He hasn't had a win now since Derek Lewis in February of 2022, and since then it was TKO loss to Gon. Obviously, remember that. That was a pretty bad one. Excuse me. So we had the loss to Gon, lost to Sergey Pavlovich in round 1, first round knockout. Alexander Volkov, Ezekiel choke round 2, and then now this rear naked choke to Tybura in round 1. So he's not just losing, he's getting finished, and it's rough to see because I think everybody likes Tai Tuivasa. He's one of the more fun fighters on the roster, both in terms of his style and personality-wise. It's a shame we haven't seen a shoey in literally 2 years at this point from him. But I don't know. I think he'll still have another chance. I know there's been some rumblings that, like, oh, I wonder if the UFC is going to cut him, but I don't think that that's going to be the case. I still think that there's potential for him, and considering that some of these losses have come to some of the best heavyweights in the division. I mean, Gon and Pavlovich are up near the top. Volkov and Tybura, honestly, are both really underrated guys who are pretty well-rounded. And, you got to hope that he can kind of rebound from this. But, yeah, 4 straight losses, it's a tough spot to be, especially when it feels like it was so recently that he was in, like, the top 5, vying for that title shot in the heavyweight division, which is really a division where it takes a couple of really good wins to get near the top to that title shot. I mean, look at Aspinall versus Pavlovich and how young those guys are, and nobody expected that to be a title fight this soon. So, he could get back, but it was a good win for Tybura. Like you said, it was good for him that it was decisive for a guy who's basically, like you were saying, he's good everywhere, but not particularly great in one area. It's good to see him get a fast finish like this, and maybe it'll propel him further towards the top. And we were talking about this a little bit before. It seems like for Tybura, the logical next fight would be Jairzinho Rozenstruik, because they've had 2 fights before get canceled, and Tybura seems like he wants to fight Jairzinho, and it makes sense rankings-wise. I mean, when you look at the heavyweight division rankings right now, just for the reference, we're recording this on Monday, so it might be changed by the time we go over it or before people see it on Tuesday. But Tybura is number 10, Rozenstruik's number 11, and Tuivasa was number 9. So you'd imagine that that's gonna switch. Maybe Tuivasa will be below Tybura and Rozenstruik in the future, but just makes sense ranking wise. But then when you think about Tybura, I was thinking this fight, and I want to know what you think. Sergey Pavlovich, and it's a bit tough because he's already lost to him and badly. But
oh, you mean for Tuivasa?
Yeah, I mean, hey, honestly, Tybura can fight him as well, but it's just
okay. I hear you.
I just think of Pavlovich as a dangerous fight for anybody, and I think with Tuivasa, if he were to get a rematch against him somehow, that would be interesting because Pavlovich can maybe get a good win again, or if it's I'm getting it mixed up because Tybura Tuivasa,
Yeah.
but if Tybura fights Pavlovich, that could be another win over a good veteran for Pavlovich, or it can build Tuivasa into a top 3 to 4 contender. Did I say Tuivasa again?
Yeah.
I'm getting all
Yeah.
scrambled, dude. But I mean Tybura. If Tybura were to fight Pavlovich and win, it's so funny with these T last names. It's not often you see me get this flustered. Usually it's the pronunciation, not the name itself. But anyway, Tybura versus Pavlovich. I think that could be a fun fight. But
Yeah,
I think it's probably going to be Tybura versus Rosenstruck. So I don't know.
yeah.
What
I
are
mean,
your thoughts on the heavyweight division right now?
yeah. So I've always found it interesting with fights that like just seem to like can't ever actually come to fruition with just two guys in particular. So like I always just found it strange that a fight could be booked for two guys on multiple occasions and then it doesn't end up happening. So, like third time's a charm, and sure, whatever.
Unless
So
it's like Habib and Tony, and then
yeah,
it's
I
like
know.
5 times, maybe 6.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So that's always the interesting thing. It always for me comes down to like, all right, well, it's a fight that has to happen, and it's two guys coming off a win, so why not? For Tuivasa's case, I was thinking something a little. I was thinking something. Yeah, I was thinking something a little different. With a guy who's a newcomer actually to UFC.
curious.
Yeah, he
Let's hear this.
he just got a big win. He got a big win himself. So it would be a guy coming off a win, and Tuivasa obviously coming off the loss. But once again, a newcomer who is not going to allow himself to get hit very much, but also does pack a very powerful punch. It would be a guy who just got a win at UFC 299, Ribas to Spain. I think that's something that I think you would see fireworks like pretty early on. I think both of them once again just are like very talented, and very talented strikers. Whereas Ribas de Spain might be able to pack just a bit more power with his punch. So I think pretty much the big thing is that there probably won't be as much grappling to really look out for. So that I think into Tuivasa's case, that's gonna prove to play, pretty important in the sense that if he does end up getting the win, like no matter how, like it's something that is not gonna set Ribas de Spain back a lot, and it's obviously gonna get Tuivasa back on the winning track, and you just go from there.
I like that fight, honestly. It's fun stylistically too, because Despain has that like taekwondo style, and it's so unorthodox to watch, especially when it's a heavyweight doing it. It's crazy how fast he can be, and I kind of agree with you too, because you don't want to really see him fight a guy who's like another grappler, because another person in a similar spot in the rankings, I was thinking, coming off a loss, would be Gelton Almeida. But then I thought about it, and I'm like, if Almeida fights him and he's able to get him down, what are we even really thinking?
Yeah, exactly.
The only way that Tuivasa wins that fight really is if he knocks him out within the first few seconds before the takedown happens. But yeah, I like, honestly, the Despain fight. You wonder if the UFC would book it, because like you said, one guy coming off a win, one guy coming off a loss, but makes a lot more sense, I think, than anyone that I can really see in the rankings, honestly.
I think a guy like that, kind of seems like he's pretty experienced beyond his years, to be honest.
For sure.
At least that's kind of what I gathered from his win at UFC 299.
Yeah,
so,
he's like very well known in like the Taekwondo
Yeah.
world. So like he's been striking
That's cool.
way longer, which is it's definitely valid experience. I mean, look at Alex Pereira, look at Cedric Doumbé in the PFL. These, and even Israel Adesanya, if you want to even go back further. So you've seen this before. Could be interesting. It just stinks because Tai Tuivasa is so likable and he's in such a rough position right now. And because he's so well liked, Marcin Tybura kind of gets a win that isn't, I just don't know if it's really going to get him to that next step right away, as great as it was, which it's rough for him. But Another fight though on the card that I think had a much rougher ending, really for both guys, was Brian Battle versus Ange Losa. I think that's how you say it. We were listening to Bruce Buffer right
That
before
was
the
pretty
pod.
good.
Yeah, I think that was close. But anyway, for those who didn't see it, this fight ended in a no contest, but it shouldn't have been because Brian Battle was bringing the fight and dominating the fight against Losa. And the fight basically went for, one round and another minute because Losa got poked in the eye. And it's fair to say he did get poked in the eye, but to end the fight over that and then to try and fight Brian Battle a minute later after the stoppage, as weird as that was, doesn't really look good because when you see guys get poked in the eye, you usually see like they have to blink a lot or there's like swelling, their eyes red. Losa's eye, you can't really judge damage sometimes just by looking at it, but it looked fine. He wasn't really blinking that much. He seemed to be pretty calm when he said he couldn't see. And then, like I said, Battle, and him exchange some words, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose, and Losa all of a sudden wants to fight him after not wanting to fight him about 50 seconds earlier. So I think that's really as far as you can break it down. I mean, Battle was dominating him everywhere in the clinch, on the feet. Just what did you think of this bizarre fight at the Apex?
Well, Brian Battle's a guy that I think has already given us like a very good showing of what he's able, and even in this fight alone too, a very good showing of what he's able to bring to UFC as a whole. With he's already racked up a good amount of finishes and whatnot, and I think it's just a guy that a lot is just very exciting. This for this fight, it seemed like kind of what it really seemed like was a kind of a mismatch for Losa, honestly. Like he couldn't hang with Brian Battle's range really like whatsoever. I think at least when that second round started, Losa was trying to keep the jab out and just trying to trade with him that way. But like there's only so much you're gonna do with just a jab if you can't make any combos out of it. So I mean,
Battle just looked like he was on one, man. Like he looked a lot. And to be fair, Brian Battle very well rounded in general. Can get a little bit sloppy sometimes when he gets in a brawl, and like even in this fight, he left his chin out a few times and didn't have to pay for it because it seemed like there was such a mismatch. But yeah, it seemed like he was really just dominant from start to finish. And it's just a shame to not get a win when you show up looking that good and that much better than he did even in his last fight. And this is a guy who, has won a lot of fights right now in the UFC. He's a tough winner too. He's
true.
a lot more marketable, I think, than like people maybe give him credit for. I know he always fights at the pretty much at the apex, but his last two fights before this finishes. First round knockout versus Gabe Green, and then a second round rear naked choke, AJ Fletcher. And this fight, he was well on his way to a win, possibly on his way to a finish, and just gets it snatched away from him by Losa in a way. And, would you agree that it just seemed like Losa wanted a way out of there? Because I know you can't really confirm it, but like the way it looked in there just didn't seem like he thought he had any real chance.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily see what he gets out of that other than because once again, like how are you supposed to know that you're gonna lose the fight before it even ends? So
I mean, to be
true, yeah,
he was kind of getting lit up, especially towards the end there. And it's sometimes too, I feel like it might not even be, losing the fight. It's just maybe like not wanting to get finished, or maybe you're just too tired and you don't want to continue, or maybe even sometimes it's just you want to have the pride of not getting a loss and maybe being able to pull like a fast one. I mean, I don't know. This is just speculation.
Something for a UFC fight that I find just very strange because everyone's watching essentially, so you're not really like pulling a fast one on anybody other than in the record books, it's just going to show up as a no contest. So, I mean, from here, it's just I think you can just keep maybe not keep fast tracking Brian Battle, but I think
treat it like it was a win. Because
yeah.
it basically was. Like, it was going in that direction.
Yeah, he can definitely keep ascending here.
It kind of reminds me, and obviously not to the same level, right now at least, but remember when Sean O'Malley fought Pedro Munoz and it was the no contest, and O'Malley, by the time it was a no contest, was kind of winning the fight, and so people were just like, you can move him up, and then he obviously fought Jan after that. I would do the same thing with Battle. I think he's a good fighter. I think he does deserve a jump in competition. Maybe somebody who, I don't know, isn't going to stop the fight over the eye poke like that. It was just... the reason why I don't like it is because he basically tried to fight him a minute later and looked completely fine. Like, if that didn't happen, I would be more, I guess sympathetic to the situation. But, like, in my opinion, it's just kind of crappy to tell the ref and the doctor, I can't see. And then the second he kind of like gets mad at you about that, Brian Battle gets mad, then all of a sudden it's showtime again and there's no problem with his eye. Like, it's just, I don't know. I just didn't think it was a good look. At the very least, it wasn't a good look.
I might be mistaken, but wasn't there a fairly recent Apex card that ended in a no contest? I could.
There's been so many, man.
Yeah.
Like Apex cards, not no contest.
Yeah,
I couldn't even.
But no, at least for this fight, yeah, we kind of wrapped it up pretty nicely, I guess.
Yeah. It's just unfortunate for Brian Battle when he showed up looking that good, but the rest of the card was decent. There were some good moments. Always good to see OSP get a win. He's been an OG of the sport, been around for a while. Gerald Meerschaert, Mike Davis, both had nice submissions. Decent card. But next week, it's another card at the Apex, UFC Vegas 89. Like I said, we're getting closer and closer to UFC Vegas 100. But this one in the Apex main event at 125, which I think is interesting, Amanda Ribas versus Rose Namajunas. Now, I don't love that Rose Namajunas is fighting at 125, especially after how that fight with Manon Fiorot looked, because the way I see it, Manon is basically at the top of the division, and if Rose couldn't beat her, what's the point of staying in that weight class when you've had so much success at 115? And kind of similar situation for Amanda Ribas, another person, in my opinion, who looks a lot better at 115. So this fight is at flyweight instead at 125. To me, it just doesn't really make that much sense. Should be a fun one no matter what, but I just don't really get the weight class.
Well, maybe if this right here, this matchup in particular is what UFC wanted to go for, then perhaps the move up to 125 is because probably at 115, Amanda Ribas would probably be just a lot more overwhelmed in terms of the striking, already not having a very good chin as it is, and then having to stand across a Rose Namajunas who, doesn't get a ton of credit for it, at least nowadays, but it does still have a lot of power and is, very good at putting all her striking together. So, I don't see much.
Let me ask you this, what does a win for either of them do? You get what I mean? Both of them are, in my opinion, they're both factors at 115, but at 125, it's just feels like they're going a weight class up just to not cut the weight. And that's, I'm not speculating that, but I'm just saying that it just, to me, it doesn't seem like there's a clear outcome where either fighter wins here and then it's straight to the top at 125. It just doesn't really make sense that it's just at that weight class, in my opinion. I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but
and if I feel like a loss for Rose Namajunas would be good. I feel like a loss for her is something that would be a lot more detrimental in her case than a loss for Amanda Ribas. But I could be wrong. But no, I'm not entirely sure.
We talk about the stakes a lot in main events. Even this past week with Tuivasa and Tybura, it's a fun fight, but there's no implication on even the top five really. And this fight, in a way, is almost even less important to the weight class that it's in, because neither of them are really at the top at 125.
I guess there's just not much. There's not too many fights left for Rose Namajunas left in her UFC career, and so maybe just to move up to another weight class is something that she just fresh matchups and whatnot, and just trying to put on a show for the fans. But
yeah, I mean, Ribas is number 8 at flyweight, number 7 at strawweight, so she's in a pretty similar position in both weight classes. So I guess if Rose wins, she'll be in the top 10. For, like I said, she already lost to Manon Fiorot, who's number 3 right now. So that's one top contender that you just don't really want to see that fight again. There's Macy Barber if Rose gets a win, or even if Blanchfield is fighting Fiorot. That's another fight I don't really love.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that seems like it's already booked, and then on the other hand, it's fighters that are seemingly like at the best point of their careers, and they're in a stride right now, and
like I just don't see a spot for Rose to fit in at 125 really, even with a win, because if Fiorot isn't even the champion right now, and that fight wasn't really even that competitive, that's why I just you wonder. I get the fresh start, but in a way she's already kind of had the chance against the best of the best at that weight class. So maybe it's just a matter of wanting to fight and maybe feeling a little better right now at 125 than she does at 115, which is completely fair. Like, how I feel. Like, we're just sitting here. Who are we to say to somebody like, hey, you have nothing more to prove, you should stop fighting? If you enjoy fighting, you should keep fighting.
Yeah.
Even if whatever the fans say doesn't matter.
But that's what it feels like. And obviously there's no disrespect by that. It's just you don't want to see somebody take I guess a loss that maybe doesn't need to happen. But
yeah, that's a good way of putting it, honestly. But besides that, there's a few sleeper fights on this card. Peyton Talbot versus Cameron Simon at 135. That should be a really fun fight between two awesome prospects. And then
I've been looking at a bit of Talbot. I guess just to talk about this fight a little bit, and he honestly reminds me of like a young Sean O'Malley.
He has really great striking. Insane time.
He's a flashy guy, I feel like, and is obviously, once again, like you just said, is very capable of putting it all together with the striking, and that always creates for fun, for a good amount of action either way. I guess just in Simon's case is this well, actually more in Talbot's case, because kind of how the UFC was with doing with Sean O'Malley when he was starting, like kind of protecting him and easing him up the ranks and whatnot. So for Talbot here, I feel like this is actually like
I don't think that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a pretty tough matchup. So
yeah, I mean, he's Cameron Simon. He's only lost to Christian Rodriguez, who is obviously another good fighter. So you're having an undefeated guy, 7-0, versus 9-1 Cameron Simon. It just, I mean, this is always fun though. I love when they put two really good prospects up against one another, especially when they both end up being pretty good, and then you can like look back at that fight and you're like, wow, these guys fought that long ago. It's kind of like when I think about Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway won, like when they back in like the featherweight days for Poirier, and then they fought again all the way at UFC 236 for the interim lightweight title. So at like another division, like you almost forget that first fight even happened. So I don't know. I think this will be a fun card in general. It just seems like there's a lot of fighters who are all action, like Billy Quarantillo versus Yusuf Zalal, Emin Shabazian versus AJ Dobson, Justin Taffa versus Carl Williams. Like, it just seems like this card is going to have a lot of fun scraps on it. Julian Erosa's on the card. I didn't even notice that last week when I was looking at it. That should be a fun fight. But, Mo Usman, too, actually fighting on this card. So, it's a bit of
something it's not a card that could create for exciting finishes.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we say what we say about the atmosphere, but if the fights are good, that's all you really can ask for as a fan. It doesn't matter where.
And I mean, for one thing, for what it's worth, for this card that just happened, UFC Vegas 88 and the Bryan Battle and Loosa fight. I mean, afterwards, if this took place in an arena with a crowd and all that, then how much do we really get to hear of the back and forth between them? And
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you know, we do kind of crap on the Apex sometimes, but that always has been, I think, the novelty of it is that you can hear these conversations between fighters. And, you know, I remember always liking to hear when the punches would land or you hear the corner advice. So it definitely does have its positives. I guess it just feels like it's oversaturated sometimes. I think that's always been our kind of criticism of it. But it's never really towards the fighters. You can't really hate on the fighters for having to fight. You know what I mean? Like, it's not their fault that they're in the Apex. It's the UFC that's putting them there. It's just, you wonder sometimes how some of these fights would be with a crowd. Like I was talking about that OSP fight, for example. That was a war. Imagine that in an arena that was packed to the gills. The atmosphere would have been nuts. But instead, it's basically dead silent, which is, that to me is the downside. But I wish we could live in a world where you could have both. But I guess not. It is what it is. I still think next week's card is going to be fun, even though it is another one at the Apex. Getting, like I said, even closer to UFC Vegas 100. That's going to be so exciting when we do. We got to do something special for that. We have to plan that out between the two of us and surprise the viewers with something interesting. But UFC Vegas 89 next week. Ribas versus Rose Namajunas at 125. And we will be there to cover it. So we'll see y'all.
Like a superstar, doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.